In the ashes of war, silence hung over Europe. Streets once filled with the roar of tanks now carried the whispers of survival. The year is 1945. The guns have fallen silent. The soldiers are coming home, and the smoke that once covered the skies begins to lift. Across Europe and the wider world, victory tastes bittersweet. Cities lie in ruins. The walls still stand, but the people inside them have changed. What was once familiar now feels foreign. The war has ended, but its shadow stretches long over the hearts of those who survived it. Rubble lines the streets where children play with broken helmets and pieces of metal that once belonged to tanks. Women queue for hours for bread, clutching ration books like lifelines. Every meal is a quiet act of endurance. The hum of factories returns, but the rhythm is slower now, uncertain. Men walk through the gates, tired but determined, faces worn from years of battle. They don't talk much. They don't have to. Everyone understands. Nations begin the slow process of rebuilding. Bricks are laid where bombs once fell. Bridges rise again over rivers that carried the remains of war. Governments promise renewal, yet for many, the real battle has just begun. The struggle to find meaning in peace. The older generation wants order, safety, and a return to the world they knew before everything collapsed. The younger generation, however, feels something different stirring inside them. They crave something beyond survival. They want life, noise, color, and movement. The 1940s are years of restraint. Clothes are simple. Music is polite. People ration food, fuel, and even dreams. Entertainment is modest. Radio broadcasts, community dances, small celebrations where the laughter feels borrowed. Yet beneath the quiet surface, something restless grows. The children who grew up among ruins are reaching adolescence. They've seen what fear does to people, and they want none of it. They want to live fast, loud, and free. America, untouched by the devastation seen across Europe, becomes the symbol of possibility. Its cities hum with industry, its people with optimism. Soldiers return home to a booming economy. Suburbs rise from open fields, and cars fill the highways. Yet even there, beneath the calm of the 1950s, youth begin to rebel. They don't want their parents' careful routines or the silent weight of expectation. They want something that feels alive. Across the ocean, Europe listens. The world's airwaves start to hum with new rhythms. The blues, jazz, gospel, sounds born from hardship, transformed into joy. In smoky bars and makeshift clubs, musicians play faster, louder, wilder. The beat hits the gut before it reaches the ears. It is the sound of freedom, and soon it will have a name, rock and roll. Before that explosion of sound, though, the world lives in a strange in-between. The old order still grips tightly to tradition. Schools preach discipline. Churches warn against temptation. Parents expect obedience. But radios are cheap, and records are spreading. Every turn of the dial opens a window to a world without rules. Young people begin to dress differently. Their hair grows longer, their words sharper. They gather in cafes, movie theaters, and dance halls, chasing something they can't yet define. They aren't just rejecting the past, they're inventing the future. Behind every song that blares from a jukebox lies the memory of ration books and empty shelves. The hunger that once was for bread has become a hunger for experience. That transformation, from survival to self-expression, defines the post-war generation. As the 1950s take shape, a quiet revolution begins. Cameras capture smiling families and tidy homes, yet outside those picture frames, a cultural storm is forming. New technology, new art, new voices are challenging everything the older world held sacred. The music grows louder, the skirts grow shorter, the cars get faster. The world itself starts to spin quicker. For the first time, the youth realize they are a force, not just followers of tradition, but makers of it. This is the world standing on the edge of change. From rubble to rhythm, from silence to sound, from ration books to rock and roll, a generation is about to step out of the shadows and dance under its own light. The world is rebuilding, but the spirit of the young refuses to stay quiet. By the early 1950s, factories hum again, streets glow with neon, and radios fill the air with something new, a pulse that doesn't belong to the old world. The war generation speaks of duty, but their children speak of dreams. In smoky dance halls and crowded diners, a rhythm begins to spread. It starts as a whisper in the American South, the blues, gospel, and country colliding into something raw and electric. That rhythm crosses oceans and borders, lighting sparks wherever young people gather. It's reckless, loud, and impossible to ignore. Parents call it noise. The youth call it freedom. The world calls it rock and roll. Elvis Presley swivels his hips on television, and suddenly everything changes. Teenagers who grew up in quiet, cautious homes feel something powerful awaken inside them. For the first time, they have an identity separate from their parents. A sound, a look, a language. Record stores explode with sales. Magazines capture new fashion. Posters of rebellious faces cover bedroom walls, once lined with wartime medals. In England, the echoes of rationing still linger, but the youth are ready to move on. They trade uniforms for leather jackets, victory songs for electric guitars. Skiffle bands pop up in garages and back rooms. The Beatles, just boys from Liverpool, start playing to tiny crowds, unaware they're about to lead a global cultural revolution. The old world, built on obedience and structure, doesn't quite know how to respond. Teachers warn about the corruption of modern music. Politicians call it a passing fad. Churches preach against it. Yet every attempt to silence it only makes it louder. The music becomes a banner for rebellion, not against nations, but against limits. Beyond the stage, the change is even deeper. Young women cut their hair short, step into jobs, and refuse to go quietly back into traditional roles. Young men question authority and chase freedom instead of routine. Cars, movies, and fashion become symbols of identity. For the first time in history, youth culture is not just a phase, it's a movement. The sound of rock and roll becomes the heartbeat of a new age. The radio becomes a weapon of change, carrying voices across continents. DJs like Alan Freed in America or Brian Matthew in Britain become cultural icons, bridging gaps between class and race. Music starts breaking walls that politics couldn't. Meanwhile, cinema picks up the same energy. Marlon Brando and James Dean give a face to rebellion. The wild one and rebel without a cause don't just entertain. They define what it means to be young in a changing world. Teenagers see themselves on screen, uncertain, angry, and alive, and they realize they aren't alone. As the decade rolls on, color floods everything. The clothes grow brighter, the cars shinier, the voices bolder. Television spreads faster than ever before, connecting people through shared icons and sounds. The post-war gloom begins to lift for good. By the early 1960s, that restless energy has turned global. The youth of Europe, America, and beyond move in rhythm together, not through war or hardship, but through music, art, and style. The Beatles lead the British invasion. Elvis continues to rule across oceans. The generation once born in rubble now dances in record shops and concert halls. For the first time, the young control what the world listens to, watches, and wears. The past has taught them loss, but the future belongs to their rhythm. They have turned scarcity into style, obedience into expression, and survival into celebration. The ration books are gone. The music never stops. What began as a whisper of change has become an anthem, the sound of a generation reborn. By the mid-1960s, the energy that began with a beat has grown into a movement. The young no longer want to simply dance. They want to define the world on their own terms. What started as rhythm now carries ideas. The music, once dismissed as reckless noise, becomes the voice of a generation unwilling to be silent. The streets begin to fill again, not with soldiers, but with protesters. The same countries that once united to fight a world war now face battles within their own borders. Between tradition and change, control and expression, silence and speech. From London to New York, Paris to Berlin, the youth take their rebellion beyond the jukebox and into the streets. rock and roll evolves. Its edges sharpen. The songs grow heavier, the lyrics bolder. Bob Dylan's words question authority. The Rolling Stones turn swagger into a statement. The Beatles move from love songs to revolutions. The world that once danced to the beat now listens to the message behind it. Universities become breeding grounds of ideas. The young begin to challenge not just their parents' music, but their politics, their values, their wars. For many, it's no longer enough to live differently. They want to build differently. The post-war obedience has given way to confrontation, the discipline of the past, replaced by defiance. Television cameras capture everything. Marches, speeches, and concerts fill the screens that once showed quiet family dinners. The same medium that spread rock and roll now spreads resistance. The movement's power lies not in violence, but in visibility. The youth realize the world is watching, and they refuse to look away. Every part of life starts to shift. Fashion rejects conformity. Art bursts with color and symbolism. The old structures, family, faith, gender, government, all feel the pressure of change. The generation that once inherited the ruins of war is now building a culture of its own, one fueled by rhythm, courage, and the desire to be seen. The turning point is not a single moment, but a series of awakenings. It happens when a girl cuts her hair short and calls it freedom. When a boy burns his draft card. When a singer refuses to censor his lyrics. When millions of young people realize they have the numbers, the voice, and the will to change everything. And through it all, the music never stops. It carries the tension, the anger, the hope. From the electric guitars of Woodstock to the anti-war anthems echoing through city streets. It becomes the language of rebellion, a rhythm that unites the restless hearts of a generation that refuses to go quietly. This is the moment the world shifts on its axis. The children of Ration Books and rubble, once grateful just to survive, now demand the right to live on their own terms. They no longer inherit the world. They remake it. The war built walls. Rock and roll tore them down. The world they built is not the one they were born into. The children of Ration Books, raised in the ruins of war, fed on discipline and silence, grew into the dreamers who refused to stay quiet. They turned their hunger into creativity, their pain into rhythm, and their rebellion into art. They did more than dance to new music. They rewrote what it meant to be young. Before them, youth was a waiting room, a quiet stretch between childhood and responsibility. After them, it became a season of power, a time when the world could be questioned, challenged, and changed. Every generation since has lived in the echo of their defiance. Every song that dares to be different, every artist who refuses to be censored, every movement that rises from the streets carries a piece of that same spirit, the belief that freedom is not given, it's created. Their revolution was not fought with weapons, but with sound. No flags, no generals, no orders, only rhythm, words, and courage. They proved that a song could travel faster than any army, that a single idea could shake empires, and that culture, not conquest, is what endures. Look around today, the fashion, the music, the voices that question power. Every trace of individuality, every burst of color, every act of self-expression carries the fingerprints of that generation. They didn't just rebuild their world. They reinvented what it means to live in one. From Ration Books to rock and roll, their journey was more than survival. It was resurrection. They rose from silence and gave the world a soundtrack of rebellion, hope, and identity. And though the music has changed, the heartbeat remains the same. The rhythm of a generation reborn, still pulsing, still echoing, still reminding us that out of the darkest times can come the loudest light.